Hi, this is Mark Russell, the writer behind The Flintstones and Snagglepuss, and you're listening to a podcast named Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
The gang's all here, they're on the case, and there's no ghost that they wouldn't face, 'cause they dig it, Scooby-Doo. Yeah, they dig it, Scooby-Doo.
Hey gang, and welcome to another episode of a podcast named Scooby-Doo, the show that attempts to unravel 50 years of mysteries, meddling kids, and masked villains. My name is Mike Josick, and I'll be your guide through all things ghostly and groovy as I investigate every angle of every mystery and beyond. So grab yourself some Scooby snacks, fire up the mystery machine, and let's start the show.
Light 'em up.
Ooh, how about a ghost story? There once was a girl lit eerily from below.
How about we worry about surviving this ghost story first?
And here we are at episode 44 of the podcast. So happy to be back and so happy to be bringing you all another great conversation with one of the many contributors to the 50-plus year legacy of the franchise you all know and love. As you've probably surmised from the title of the episode, my chat this time around is with the inimitable Jill Thompson, another creative who has worked on the DC Hanna-Barbera line of books, in this case, Scooby Apocalypse. While Jill is one of many talented artists to provide covers for these series, she's definitely one of my favorites. I have been a longtime fan of her work and actually interviewed her in previous years about her other comic book work, but this is the first time that the two of us actually sat down and chatted about Scooby-Doo. This episode of the podcast also heralds in a new era of podcasting for the show, as I had originally approached Jill to be a part of the Apocalypse Variations, which it's a feature that I've been running over on the podcast blog and has been up until this point exclusively done as text interviews. Currently over on the blog, scoobydopress.wordpress.com, there are interviews with Joel Jones, John Boy Myers, Yasmin Putri, and Will Conrad. I suggest you go check those out if you haven't already. Basically, the concept behind the Apocalypse Variations, it was essentially created for a couple of reasons. One, simply just looking to generate some interesting and regular content for the blog. And the other was to showcase some folks who had worked on the Scooby Apocalypse series, but who maybe had a limited contribution. If you had only contributed like one variant cover, it's not like an hour-long, audio conversation is something that you can maybe sustain, but still definitely worth a chat. And some of those folks might not even be interested in doing a full audio interview. So just to sort of give that option and just be kind of as low impact as I possibly can. And again, the focus was initially on generating content for the blog. However, enter Jill Thompson. When I proposed the idea to her, she was like, why can't we do an audio chat? And honestly, I couldn't think of a good reason not to. So welcome one and all to the inaugural edition of the audio version of the Apocalypse Variations. One big advantage to doing these as longer form conversations is the opportunity to talk process and stuff in a way that I can't really in the short text interviews, which are basically a questionnaire. I'll still be doing those text interviews on the blog for those that are just interested in those quick 20 questions kind of format, but I do like that the option to sit down and have a nice audio chat with me is now open. And while Jill is kicking things off, I already have another great cover artist lined up, so expect another one of these to show up somewhere down the road. With that said, I don't want to take up any more of your time prior to getting to the actual conversation, so I'll just thank everybody for swinging by and checking the podcast out, and I sincerely hope you dig my conversation with the wonderful and talented Jill Thompson. Enjoy, and we'll see you all on the other side. I first encountered today's guest when I picked up a copy of Wonder Woman Special number 1 about 30 years ago now. I think it's been 30 years. I was very much attracted to this new artistic voice that brought a very different look and energy to the adventures of everyone's favorite Amazon princess. And since then, I have followed her career as she made the jump from DC's superhero world to their more mature line of books, Vertigo, where she worked on popular series such as The Sandman and Invisibles, as well as a cool Diamond in the Rough miniseries called Finals with writer Will Pfeiffer, and The Little Endless, which she reimagined Neil Gaiman's Endless as toddlers in an all-ages storybook. She's also made her mark with her highly entertaining and beautifully illustrated and painted creator-owned books, winning an Eisner Award for Beasts of Burden with co-creator Evan Dorkin, and her Scary Godmother character has appeared in children's books, a comic book series, a stage play, and 2 animated specials produced by Mainframe Entertainment. I still consider myself lucky that I own copies of both of them. Somewhere in the middle of all that, she's also even done the artwork for an X-Files graphic novel. She joins me today to talk a little bit about her work, contributing 3 of the variant covers for Scooby Apocalypse, and inaugurating this first audio edition of the Apocalypse variation. Jill Thompson, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Let's talk about some Scooby-Doo.
So I'm assuming anybody of our rough age group has a pretty steady diet of Scooby-Doo at some point in their childhood. Were you a regular watcher of the series? Was Scooby something that you actually were attracted to, or was it just kind of something in the background?
I most certainly was a fan of Scooby-Doo and an avid watcher of it. My brother and I would, like I think most kids of our generation, wake up way much earlier than our parents, grab some sugary cereal, and we would pull some pillows up against the console television that was on the floor in the living room, and we would turn it on kind of low because my parents were, still sleeping. It was on really early, I remember. And we would, Scooby-Doo was something to look forward to. It was fun and spooky. And I even remember being just drawn to the look of it. It had a great song. and I just remember the opening credits with all the bats coming flying out at you with that spooky mansion. That and Johnny Quest. Johnny Quest was also on.
Yes.
Same, one followed the other. So it was definitely very Alex Toth land on Saturday morning. And there was adventure and, adventure and mystery. It pretty much go very well hand in hand with Count Chocula or Kaboom cereal, even more sugary and colory and dye and stuff like that. So yes, very big fan.
Yeah, if I wasn't doing this podcast, I'd probably be doing a Johnny Quest podcast as far as old Hanna-Barbera characters.
That'll be next.
So I'm assuming by your description of the opening credits, Scooby-Doo, Where Are You was your first contact?
Yes, it was.
That was your show?
The original Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
Even as a kid, I remember being, there are these good Scooby-Doos. And then, hey, Sonny and Cher is on Scooby-Doo, or Phyllis Diller, and, they would, and the Addams Family, or they would have guest stars from other television shows drawn as cartoons on there. And then I remember being really upset. I did not like the later versions of Scooby-Doo, Scrappy-Doo. I don't believe in, any sorts of violence towards animals, but I really want someone to kick Scrappy-Doo into the street. And then there was, even Scooby-Dumb and Scooby-Deer. It's they're like, everyone loves this. I can see when I went to art school, and I had an advertising class for advertising illustration. I had this advertising teacher that he would talk about mascots and the creation of mascots in 50s and 60s and 70s for, Charlie Tuna, oh, he's a wise guy. And, this guy, oh, he likes, punch in the nose was a Hawaiian punch guy. So I feel like it was, for Scooby-Doo, it was everybody loves that dog. We need more of those dogs. Give them a family or something, It's let's beat a dead horse.
I'm pretty sure that was 100% the process.
I'm pretty sure.
I did get a weird image when you were describing the marketing guy talking about, mascots. And I just got this picture in my head of Grant Morrison teaching one of these courses and teaching people to make super sigils out of brands.
Right. That's a great story. I could totally write that now. It's creating sigils. It's all of the mascots we're doing is the only way that it's in fact, I'm sure Grant somewhere is someone talking about sigils? Where it's probably it probably works into his theory of magic, just in the fact that why are these corporations so huge? Why do they own nearly everything around us? Because they created sigils that we brand ourselves with and then kind of invoke every day by knowing them or singing a jingle or doing, like recognizing, Ronald McDonald and creating more of his land. Yeah, it's probably some kind of crazy arcane magic.
Yeah, he actually wrote about that a little bit in...
Unfortunately, it didn't work for the Scooby Dumb family and the the Scrappy Doos of the world.
Although, to be fair, Scooby has been around for 50 years.
The magic has to be pure. It has to, right?
It does kind of weirdly... I ask people usually at the end of all of our conversations, like, what do you think is the staying power for this franchise? Like, what is the alchemy, the magic elixir that has kept this thing going in perpetuity for, half a century? Maybe it's magic. Maybe it's literally branding.
No, I think it's that it's not magic. They're technically,
that's a clever play.
Technically, if you think about it, they're technically a band of Mulders who are really Scullys, because not one of them, except with the exception of maybe Shaggy, because Shaggy's always like, zoinks, it's a ghost. But even Fred's like, let me tie up my 70s cravat or whatever that thing is. It's like, let's solve the mystery, gang. It's like it's confidence. Like Freddy's super confident. They go in to do the thing. Daphne right in there with him, but Velma, she's, I don't know, she's much more vocal than Daphne is, certainly, and she goes off to do more things, and then they just kind of throw her like a weakness in the fact that knock her glasses off, and she's got to crawl around because she's super brainy about stuff, but she's also sarcastic about things. She's the one that she doesn't believe anything is really the that robot monster or whatever whoever's mask they're gonna pull off at the end, and it always ends up being a horrible capitalist. So you can say it's a bunch of Scullys who are kind of more hippie-ish because 1970s or whenever that was made up, and then they pull the hat off and go, oh, yet again it's someone trying to poison the earth or steal the money or take the money away from the old lady that owns the spooky looking house. I don't even know how to quantify that with a term. Is it youth? Would you say it now? It's a bunch of Zennials getting it over on the boomers. It
could be, and it also occurred to me that everybody always looks at them as just they're 100% into the mystery and they're just always looking for the mystery, but they're also teenagers, and teenagers have that sense of invincibility.
Yeah.
And I've never thought of that before.
Teenagers, they can drive. I'm if you think about it, as a kid, when I watched it, it's wow, I wish I was cool and had a creepy panel van. Actually, if I could have the mystery machine, I would love to have the mystery machine or the Mach 5. Those are the two. Well, wait, or the Monster Mobile too. But it's as a kid, I'm looking at them going, I want to be like them. And I didn't stop and think of all the, the things that you think about too much now. And I think everybody thinks about too much. How old are they? Where are they? They're always driving around. How can they be out driving around the country? Do they not have families? Who's paying for everything? Where do they get their money from? Do they ever get money from solving these mysteries? I don't know. They're all around different types of, it's sometimes they look in places that look like they could be coastal Maine or Florida or the mountains, or they're hippies. They're driving around. They don't have a house.
I think
they live in that van.
I think Velma's the youngest, and I think she's 16, and then I think the other three are 17, and who knows how old Scooby is. But I think the idea was this was summer, and they were driving around on a summer.
On summer break.
Yeah. And it was just never I think it might have been in the Bible of the show. I never got a chance to talk to Joe Ruby or Ken Spears before they passed, but I do know one of the story editors for one of the more recent shows, and that was kind of built into one of the show that he worked on. They ended up abandoning it after the first episode too, and it never really got developed beyond that. But my impression was they kind of picked it up from the early material because they got to see all the original stuff.
So that's always just kind of been like in my head canon now, in the back of my head, that's how it started. These kids, summer break, we got a van, let's drive around and solve mysteries.
Well, I mean, I put too much thought into just even that bunch of questions that I have now. But as a kid, it's like a fairy tale. Or the same way that if you tell a story to a kid, it's like, come on back over. It's like, okay, there's this monster, see? And he can't go in the water. So you can't cross the river over there or else he'll get you. And then you're like, well, where did he come? As a little kid, you don't think of where did he come from? Or you'll say, once upon a time, there was a princess and she lived in a tower. And it's like people, like when you tell a kid a story in a once upon a time setting, you don't have to explain a lot of things because it's like, these are the rules. It's like, oh, and they can fly. It's not like, how did they become, how can they fly? It's like, they just can't. Okay.
They don't need the internal logic.
So to me, I guess, when they're coming up with the story, and it's like, we need this to be episodic where it happens every week. So it's like they drive around and solve mysteries and they're cool. And like one of them's like this. And then there's the groovy guy and there's the cute girl. And then there's the brainy girl. And then there's kind of I don't even know what you would call, like back in the day, what you'd call Shaggy. And like, was he supposed to be your Dobie Gillis looking guy?
He was the beatnik,
from that old show, the beatniky one, right? Like, but he didn't. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, because I look at their clothes and I can't even figure out what, like, I never saw anyone wear anything like that, even in like super old Sears catalogs. But thank God they weren't dressed like that. So, it's like, what's the gimmick where we can get them to go around to different places? So it's like, we can't have the mystery come to them. They have to go to the mystery. They have to be able to go to the spooky barn or the haunted house or the Dutchman's mine or whatever it is. And that just makes it okay for everybody. But I think I've liked so many iterations of it. And the Scooby Apocalypse comic, I think, is just something that naturally works. You can throw them or those characters into that situation. One of my favorite t-shirts, I had a t-shirt, like obviously, not a licensed t-shirt. It came out a long time ago from Threadless, and it was just zombie apocalypse style.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. And it
was like just a mystery machine, but it was all tricked out like a death mobile. And I think it was called the Misery Machine. And it had like little check marks on it. And it was like Velma was the last person standing, her and Scooby. That was it, because you saw like Fred and Daphne and Shaggy were like little, rest in peace type of things on the side of the van. They were like wandering the wasteland afterwards. And she was all kind of, battle scarred but tricked out in what was her recognizable outfit, but Mad Max out a lot. Yeah. And I was like, my God, this is brilliant. I would watch this. I would watch this show right now. And I think Scooby Apocalypse is like that. And I don't think it's the same, because it was definitely zombies, I think, on the t-shirt. But in Scooby Apocalypse, I like how they switch it out so they're fighting monsters and things were kind of more mature. And at first I loved all of that revamp of the Hanna-Barbera stuff. I really liked it.
That whole line, actually, there's so much good stuff in there.
Oh my God, the Flintstones. I cried for that. I cried reading that comic. I cried with the bowling ball.
Yes.
And the vacuum cleaner. Oh my God. I like a huge lump in my throat. It's like, this is so sad. It's like, this is, oh my God. It was like, I never thought about that kind of stuff. And what a brilliant take to sit and think what was a hilarious gimmick on the cartoon was, oh, this peacock is a feather duster or whatever. But the fact that it was a living creature with a life, and it's like, I put it in the closet. And it's like, this is my function. I'm like, no.
And when Wilma tells Fred about her hand painting, like why that's important to her, that touched me so much, because I mean, it's those layers that Mark was working on, where you've got, that whole satire or commentary on like art and art critics and that whole culture and whatever, but then it comes down to this thing that's just got so much heart, and Wilma's just saying like, this was how her people knew that they were there. Like this was their I mean, it's taking the original concept of that show, which was, I think it was kind of like, let's do the honeymooners, but what if they were cavemen? Which
was also a commentary on, life of that time, right?
Yeah.
But then to take that concept and then throw actual like archaeological, historical facts plus socialism and meaningful philosophical dialogue is pretty brilliant and beautifully illustrated.
Yes. Oh, Steve Pugh's work on that. I'm still trying to get him on the show.
Yeah. Every time he was up for an Eisner and he didn't win, I was always.
And then Snagglepuss came along, and that was like that was something else also.
I did not read that when it came out, and I got comps of it, and I don't know what happened to them. And I literally just went out and rebought it. It's by my bedside as one of the the stack that I never get to when I'm in bed at night. But yeah, I'm anxiously looking forward to reading that, and I have to set aside a time for myself to have a cup of coffee and relax and read that, because I'm sure it's going to hit me in the same way.
I got to talk to Mark and Mike Fien about that as well. That was a good conversation. Oh man, and Jeff Parker's Future Quest. Did you read the Future Quest book with the Johnny Quest and all the adventure characters? Was Jeff Parker
I did a cover for it.
Doc Shaner? Yes, you did.
I did a cover for it. I did a cover for that. I did a cover for the Flintstones one.
Did you do a Wacky Raceland?
No.
Okay.
Actually, my Johnny Quest or the Quest event, I did like classic Johnny Quest because I had to. That was also like kind of coming full circle for me, because one of my very first jobs as a comic book artist was a pinup in Johnny Quest comic that Kamiko put out about as long ago as you were referencing earlier. And Terry Austin inked me. And I just actually found that I was going through art that I had stored in my basement while I was looking for something else. And I found that piece of art. And I was like, oh my gosh, look at that. Because I love Johnny Quest. I love Doug Wildey. And then the fact that one of the very first things I ever did that I got paid for was inked by one of my like art faves was something too. So to do the cover for the Future Quest, when you say Johnny Quest, I'm like, yeah, I know that you guys updated it and it looks all kind of crazy. I saw the Jim Lee stuff, but I have to do classic Johnny and Haji. And my favorite one is like with the mummy. So it had to be mummy cover. And actually the thing that I spent the most time on was all the hieroglyphics that were in the tomb that they're looking into, because I made sure it spelled out a message.
Okay.
So
there's an Easter egg for people to find out.
Yeah. So it's a curse.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So how did you get involved? Obviously you did covers for other books as well. Was this just they were bringing other people in and saying like, hey, we want you to do like a cover for everything in the line? Or was it?
See, this is the weird thing. People ask me this question all the time. Sometimes people online or at conventions will say something like, why don't you go and work for Marvel? Or why don't you tell them that you want to do this? As if that is how one gets a job in comics. And that's not how it works. But luckily, I do have editors coming to me from time to time. They'll just send me an email saying, hey, Jill, I've got this. Do you want to do it? Which is how that stuff happened. I got offered one of those. Or sometimes I'll just make it known. I'll be like, hey, does anybody have any covers or anything? I'm looking for something I can do while I'm still working on this story, or I'm looking for something small. And they put the word out and things just come my way. And I love that kind of stuff. And I forget who the first person was it may have been Dan DiDio that just said, Jill's looking for cover work. And as a freelancer, when you ask me, do you want to do the cover to this? It's, yes, I do. But when it's actually, do you want to do the cover to this? And it's something that you really, really love, it's even better. And all of those covers are something that I really love. With, Scooby-Doo, I could have been I would have not have minded being the regular cover artist on that book. I could sit and think of, because I thought the scripts were great. So as long as I know the gist of a story, I can come up with whatever.
I totally want to see.
The one thing I kind of wish I got to draw was Scooby and Shaggy just kind of eating food. Would have been a good one too.
I want to talk a little bit about your process for creating a cover,
Okay.
Particularly for a book that
Okay.
you don't write or regularly draw, such as your cover for Scooby Apocalypse. How do you go about putting that together? You've mentioned that read scripts, so I'm assuming they provide you the script.
Well, sometimes, depending on if the script is available, they will provide you. I've asked for scripts. I know that other people sometimes have worked on covers with just a synopsis, and I've done that too. So if the script isn't fully written yet, if you know the gist of what happens, you can create a cover for it. So I knew what was going on. I think I had read some scripts for, you mentioned 14 and 15. So there was a certain storyline. It was leading up to something. Sometimes the writers have that many scripts already written, or they'll give me a script because the artist is working on the interior. And then I come up with sketches based on story points that are in there. Or sometimes I would say the one with Velma and Scooby there wasn't enough information at the time. So it was going to be, it had to be something that would work on whatever the story might be. But the other two were definitely, I think, a little bit based on just the general story that was happening, except for the Fred and Daphne one, because I believe that was going to happen in the issue. So.
Okay. Now you've worked with JMD Mateus before on Seekers.
Yes.
Did you have any communication with him on this? Okay.
For covers, you usually just talk to the editor.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I think, especially for something like this, unless they've got something in mind that they wanted to see, but usually when the editor's trying to get a cover going, they're not going to cross the streams a lot because, I'm not sure what's happening up at DC right now as far as Time Warner and AT&T needing to look at everything in a way that wasn't happening previously in my career. So I'm not sure if that happens, but just the fact that your editor has to look at something and then it would have to go to the bigger art director for stuff. And then usually it went higher upstairs just to make sure that any licensed characters, certain things were happening. There's enough places for people to have to take a look at it before you start involving the writer, because the writer's got their own set of things that everybody else is taking a look at that they have to deal with as well. So just, the editor and the art director were the people that were going to give the final okay on things.
Now you kind of have I was going to say unique position, but I mean, makes it sound maybe more auspicious than it is. But number 15 was a variant cover, and then 24 and 25 were the main covers. So I kind of assume generally that when it comes to a variant cover, it doesn't necessarily have to be attached to the script. You could just kind of maybe do whatever you want compared to a main cover, which has to be story related, or are there actual guidelines that you're supposed to follow?
Gosh, I don't remember. Usually with the variant cover, they like it to be a variant. Or maybe that's just me. It likes it to be a variant based on what's happening in the script. But sometimes, like you say, your editor can just say, we would like you to do a variant cover for this issue. And maybe the issue, I didn't know exactly what was going on in it. And they said, we just need a variant, something that, celebrates the heart of the show, which would, for this, or not the show, the heart of the
book,
the series and the story. So for this being Scooby Apocalypse is a lot more adventure oriented. And I tend to not want to just do generic. It's hard because sometimes I feel like that's more like a pinup. Yeah, I would rather know a little bit something that's going on. And, that's why I did a couple of them with a bunch of the type of monsters that had been a major part of the storyline. But I think, the one with Velma, I don't know if I don't remember if I was given much information about what it was, but they may have told me that who they wanted to focus on. I'm going to pay more attention when people ask me to do stuff now. because actually when you're thinking about it, and the thing with covers, it's really funny. I've taught students before, and I always tell them, make sure how you do cover sketches. But if they want 3 cover sketches and you can only think of 2, don't just hack out that third one, because unbeknownst to them, they are going to pick the one you hate the most, and that'll be the one that you didn't think much about. So make sure that every single thing is something you want to draw, even if it's simple. Because I'm thinking of the other ones for the Thelma cover, I think that they didn't pick. And I really wanted to do this one. And I thought it was like a great homage to nearly everything. So it was Thelma and Scooby, and maybe even Shaggy, were inside. And maybe it was because it was similar to one I had done previously, but they were inside a costume shop that was, like apocalypsed out, and they were hiding and like tending to their wounds. So there was like a big, sewing up a big gash in their leg or wrapping it up and everything. But around them were costumes that were all of the villains from the TV show.
Oh, nice.
Hanging in there that were kind of ripped and torn. So, like Ghoulie Face, and then, that like glowing helmeted, like diver's helmet one, and then the robot guy. And I went through and I looked at all the villains, the Scooby-Doo villains. I think there was like a witch doctor one with a weird giant mask. And I made sure that that we're all on the ground. So it was like, and sometimes there would be other things too, like fancy dress or, like an Abe Lincoln or something like that. But everything that was hanging or around them or disarray or had blood on it was all of the villains from the show that I could, as many as I could fit in, that I had an affection for me. And then they went with the very simple one of Thelma and Scooby crashing through something. So, yeah. So I thought, I liked all of the things that I said, but I did that really simple one because I just couldn't think of anything that was kind of, I figured if I gave them the one that had the most cool information in it, they were going to see it in the same way that I did. And they'd be like, oh, obviously this is very cool. It's a take on an old show brought into this environment. And I don't know if they just glanced at it and said, too busy or whatever. But they went with the very simple, large figured one. It's like, well, maybe I'll just have to draw that for myself one day.
The heartbreak of hearing stories like that is now I want to see it.
Somewhere around here, I have a little sketch because I did little watercolor sketches that I send in. And I'll have to find that and scan it one day for the art book of my art.
That's a nice segue from process to the materials that you use. Obviously, a lot of people are switching over to digital, but so much of what you do is watercolor. You're doing that totally analog, right? Or are you working?
Yep, totally analog.
Okay.
No, I am not working digital. I am practicing digital. It's not coming easy to me at all. But, and because of that, it's always easier for me to paint something than it is to attempt to do it digitally. So yeah, I still work completely analog, and when I plan stuff and when I do comic pages, it's all in the real world on paper and painted. And I like that. It doesn't mean I don't want to learn how to do things digitally, because I love all the bells and whistles that Procreate has, and how you can move stuff around and make lines that are really straight and shade things and, not mess up in the same exact way that you mess up on paper. But I have a great satisfaction in creating. I mean, I know how to work watercolor, and right now I don't want to stop doing it. So, and I like that it exists in the real world.
It's funny. I mean, I've been enjoying your work, like I said, since I picked up Wonder Woman Special #1. There's something about your line weight and your line work that's just always appealed to me. It's just got such a different vibe to it. Sometimes you're tighter, sometimes you're looser. There's all these like curly cues. There's not a lot of like straight lines. Feels very organic. And until sitting here and talking with you right now, I've always known that you work with watercolor. I've always appreciated watercolor, but I'm like a really big fan of watercolor. And like John J. Muth just blows me away. Like just looking at his stuff.
Me too.
Like the emotions that I feel. Moon Shadow is like a religious experience for me. And I'm just looking at one of your covers here as you're talking about it and looking at all the like bits about it.
What cover are you looking at?
I'm looking at Fools in Love with Daphne and Fred kissing and shooting all the monsters. And just seeing the subtle shading and the staining with the watercolor here and there and whatever. And realizing that that's probably an incredibly significant reason of why I've enjoyed your work for as long as I have. Not just because of your draftsmanship, but also like how that's combined with the particular aesthetic of the watercolor and how you use it.
Well, I mean, I use it. Mike
And now
Mignola
my
once
brain is
said I
going
draw
back to like
comics.
your Beasts of Burden work and your Scary Godmother work and like just kind of everything that I know that you've done that's color. And I'm like, yeah.
Well, the one thing that I know how to make watercolor do what I want it to, but sometimes, I would like it to do more and I can't figure out how to make it do it more. I have to grow and evolve with watercolor as well, because I mean, there's a certain way that I paint comics. Mike Mignola said once that I draw comics with paint. So, it's not like I'm painting like, John J. Muth or Alex Ross or someone that does hyper realistic stuff. I feel like I'm still cartooning, drawing comics with paint. So it's realistic, but not realistic, if you understand what I mean. So it's like Scary Godmother looks super cartoony, but my Beast of Burden looks more realistic, but it's not realistic at all. And when and Wonder Woman, the True Amazon still was, it wasn't like I drew Wonder Woman when I first drew her, but it was, realistic, but still cartoony. It's still comics. But I think, maybe some of the things that you like about what I do with watercolor for comics is the fact that in the line that would be inked, I actually paint that line. So there's no black, except, certain areas, like if someone's hair is black, there's no black outline on things. So there's more of an organic line, and it's in different colors for different types of things. It's incredibly tedious and it takes a lot longer, but it's the only way it looks right to me. if I don't know if that makes sense.
It's this interesting, I've studied art history and Impressionism, like turn of the century art was kind of a lot of my focus. And I feel that there's this blend of like cartooning and Impressionism in your stuff. Like there's a very defined look to, figures and objects, but the textures and the colors have a little bit more of an impressionistic feel to it. They're not as literal. I don't know. I'm trying to explain it to you and maybe not doing such a great job.
No, that's interesting. And it makes sense.
And it's all recognizable.
Well, because
there's a harmony to it, which is really interesting to me as well.
It is a shorthand to create a desired effect at the end of the day, because, it's like I have paintings that I do that I post that are a lot more realistic, like little watercolor paintings that I do of landscapes or still lifes or objects that I see around me that is completely different than the way that I paint comics. So it's giving you, the idea of a world without it being rendered in a super realistic way.
Yeah. I'm curious, you said you still haven't gotten watercolor to do all the things you want it to do. Now I'm curious, what do you want it to do that it won't do for you? If that's something that's articulatable.
It is articulatable. Back when I was first learning how to use watercolor when I was in art school, when I took a watercolor class, we had all of these rules at the beginning that we weren't supposed to do. And that was to teach you to learn value or how to mix color because color is intimidating. People want to jump right in with color all the time, but that's before they know how to make things look, it's before they know how to paint things, I guess. So, a teacher would start us out with, first of all, it was just one color. You had to choose a color, like an indigo or sepia or something really dark. So it had like an incredibly rich dark that was almost black in value. And then, you could water it down so it would be almost as light as the paper, and then the paper being your brightest bright. And then we also were not allowed to use a small brush, like a fine brush with a point on it. We had to use a 1-inch flat brush for like a couple of months in class, because that was also going to stop us from drawing an outline around anything. And we would learn how to use that brush I can use that brush now to like do an outline, because I learned enough on how to use it. I could use the edge of it. But what he was teaching us was how to use negative space to delineate shapes and use the value of the paint to create something without, literally just drawing an outline of. And I feel like I forget how to do that sometimes because I have incorporated watercolor into my drawing process of making comics. And every once in a while, I have to go back and try and paint something and limit myself as far as color goes, or I only let myself use a bigger brush. So I stop drawing on there. And I want to go back, it's like there are so many painters that I admire, like that I would love to be able to use, they're like Roland Hilter, that is this landscape artist that Grizz Grimley turned me on to. And I've really come to love their work, but I would love to be able to do some of the techniques that they do, but I just haven't practiced, and I don't incorporate that into my work because I haven't practiced it enough to be able to take some of those techniques and do it. Because when I draw comics, I shift into how I draw comics. And
you have deadlines.
Right. And, and you're creating multiple compositions on a page, you're making the action happen in each panel, but then you're also trying to make sure that there's a good composition in there, and you have to take into account where your lettering is going to go. So either you indicate where that lettering goes while you pencil it and then scan that so the letterer can work on it while you're painting. Because if you sometimes just leave that to the discretion of the letterer, they're going to cover up stuff that you don't want covered up, or create a tangent or do something that's really unpleasing to the eye, or mess up the composition. Because I'm trying to think of the flow of how your eye looks in every panel, and then the flow of how your eye looks around the page, and how I'm leading you up to the action, or I'm leading you up to an action or away from a moment or a revelation or an emotional moment. And I'm also using color to help with that as well. So it's not just the actions of what is going on, it's the color I choose and where I want the focal point in each panel, or where I want the focal point on the page. And that's a lot more, I think, when someone's making one big, beautiful painting, you have to think of all of those things, but you're not doing it in a ton of places. And also think about how it leads up to the next bunch of things that people are going to look at as well.
It's a different context.
Yeah, it's a completely different context. So doing a singular painting or an illustration can tell a story, most certainly, but you have all these other elements in comics to think about that you don't have to think about in a single illustration.
Every panel is its own piece, and every page is a piece.
Is its own piece. But it also has to go together, and there has to be a flow, and you're controlling how fast the reader is looking at each thing you're drawing, right? And
you're thinking of page breaks.
And even when I'm working on a script from someone else, I read the page, I read the whole script, a couple of times. I start taking notes about, what's like, who are the people that I have to do? Do I need reference for this? Where are they going to be? Have we seen this place before? Is it reference that I'm going to need, or is it something I make up? And then when I start reading what happens on each page, it's like, okay, based on what the information on each page, what's the thing that we're building up to on every page? Is this a page that's just a lot of information, and then the big emotional moment comes 2 pages later. So you're working your way towards that. Or does each page have something that you have to focus on? Like if it was a superhero comic, like, are you working towards the action or away from the action? Like, do you show someone getting hit, or do you show that someone, like, the aftermath of someone having been hit, and what angle that's going to come from, and which way the person is going to fly? So does that lead the reader towards the next panel? Because you don't want things to cross over each other, and you want the lettering to go in a natural way. So word balloons, where you place the people will cause, you have to remember where they go, so the lettering goes in the right spot, so you don't have tails moving around all the time underneath the word balloons back and forth. It's like there's a lot of elements that happen in comics that I think people reading comics just don't think about.
It sounds
but the
exhausting.
People who draw it really think about it.
And then they shit on you for not putting the right number of pouches on somebody's belt.
Pouches. It's the 90s. There must be pouches.
Yeah, every time I find an artist that I really enjoy and I click into their storytelling and I realize, the thought that kind of went into it, and I start to really interrogate it and think about it. And it literally takes me to a place where I get tired and I have to put it down, because the amount of work that goes into, I don't want to take away from the creative work that goes into writing a story, because you're creating a world also, and there's technical aspects to that as well. But I don't know, I just feel like there's a lot more pressure on the artist to carry that.
Well, in a collaboration, the difficult thing is the writer, they can, unless they send you a photograph of something, like if they're trying to, no matter how much that they describe something, you're not going to see what's in their head unless they give you a reference, like it's a certain type of house or a certain type of situation. They can write a paragraph, say, here, I'll say something like this. We're walking into, it's like panel one, whoever your character is. Let's make it Scooby Gang. So, the Scooby Gang walks into an old 1950s diner. We see it from inside the diner. There are patrons eating at stools up against the bar. And then there are, a banquet of booths, could be red booths, up to you. There's a saucy waitress. She's 44 years old. She looks like somebody's mom. She's kind of attractive, but she's been working all day, so she looks tired. I can write that panel description out. I can give it to you. I can, take it myself, give it to 3 other artists, and you'll get something that fills in all those boxes, but none of those things might be the exact thing I pictured in my head.
Yeah.
Right. So the writer's job is to, I'm not your hands because you can't draw. Your job is to describe an environment that you would like to see. And then when the artist collaborates, you can bitch at your artist if, it's like, I asked you for a diner and you put one guy on a stool at one table, like, you're not giving me any backgrounds, you lazy bastard. You're not showing me anything. Like, this is comics, show, don't tell. I shouldn't have to describe everything in a word balloon. But, I used to do this with my students all the time. I would give them all a script, or like, a script for a page that I would want them to do by the end of the day. And while they would all be similar, technically, they should all be similar in the angle that I asked for and stuff like that. But there's so much room for their collaboration in that process. The only time I ever got one panel where every drawing was the same is everyone Googled the same picture. It's like the first, like I had them do an assignment where they were going to be utilizing a bird's eye view and a worm's eye view a lot. And I wanted them to draw things. So I made the main character a bee. It was like, we were going to follow a bee flying through the neighborhood. So you'd like, we first was a close-up of a bee, and then the bee starts flying. So it's like bee on a flower. And then the bee zips up, like down through the grass. So then you see larger creatures when you're looking up at it. And then you would go up high in the sky so you could see the neighborhood and stuff. But everybody in that first picture had the first bee that was in the Google search image of a bee on a flower. It's like every single drawing looked the same. And then everything else was, their interpretation of what I asked for. And that's what all comics are. If this is a Superman story and you know what the characters look like, and yes, there might be a Bible for the Daily Planet or wherever it is, or Lois Lane, but then the action and the situations that happen are going to be an interpretation based on the instructions given to you in the art direction of the script. And that's the part where the artist and the writer are collaborating and making something that's, a 50-50 combination of both of their arts.
Yeah. Now, I usually ask, most of the people I've spoken to have all done a single cover, and I ask them, what about that particular composition is like their favorite thing? Seeing as how you've done 3, I will instead ask you, out of those 3, which one speaks to you the most? Which one do you either enjoyed making the most, or the one that you have the most affection for after the fact?
I think the Fred and Daphne one, kissing, because I love me some romance. I also love me some shooting monster type of fun fantasy thing. I like drawing all the monster bits coming at them. I thought it was a nice composition in general. I like using the white of the paper a lot, not because I'm lazy, because I can do some incredibly detailed things. Like if I was lazy, I wouldn't have done all the monsters around them, but I felt like it was a really interesting framing sequence, and I wanted to be more graphic with that because I felt it was an important moment, as well as it helped showcase, their kiss. And then subsequently, it, like, all the monsters then drew your eye, like little pointy bits towards them as characters. And then it also made you focus on the action of what they were doing, which not only was kissing, but it might have been their last kiss, because it looked like, well, I guess this might be it. We're going to die. So they're just kind of randomly shooting, try to take out as many monsters as possible. And then I liked doing all of the covers that I did. I liked doing the one in the sewer because I got to draw all of them. And I think that's the type of thing that I try and cover when I got to do everything. My favorite one, if the cover I had mentioned earlier, if they had chosen the one in the costume shop, that would have been my favorite one, probably, just because I got to draw I would get to draw all the other villains. But yeah, I like to draw them. I like to draw them having a kiss.
I think for me, 15, the sewer one, that was the first one that I saw, and it was so different from everything else that had sort of come before. And I enjoy your work.
There's no black line on it. I know that my work does stand out as like, because the way that it scans and the way that it prints, unless I force myself to put black paint in it, even if I darken the values when I scan it to send it, the way that the watercolor paper prints, it never looks as graphic and smooth as the things that are, pen and ink and then computer colored. But then also I think it brings, you said organic earlier, and that's something that I do say a lot when I talk about my work. It's like, there's no real straight lines. And I think there's this organic feel that I bring to it. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, because you were going to say something about why you thought it was different.
Well, I was going to say that because it was different and it really stood out of that first sort of batch of kind of covers and issues. And like I said, because I enjoy your work, that had been kind of like my favorite. And I've always sort of like held to that. But before we started recording, you had mentioned that you did like the kiss. And I've kind of had it up on my screen. I've sort of been looking at it while we're talking and just really noticing like the foreshortening and the figure work and the naturalness of it and its kind of gestural quality and the composition of it. And it...
Does it look like a good kiss? It was really, okay, good. Because sometimes I see kisses being drawn in comics and it doesn't look sexy to me at all. It doesn't look like, it looks, it doesn't look sensual, I guess. And I wanted this to have a passionate feel to it.
And Freddie looks...
It's a hard thing to draw because I always think the moment, like the actual kiss is never as good looking in a drawing as almost kissing. So like when I was drawing that, I was like, and I liked what it looked like, and I still like what it looks like, but I worked so hard to make sure it looked like a natural kiss.
I think they have a youthful quality to them that I think is more youthful looking than a lot of the other imagery, like in the book and on any of the covers. And I think there's something about that also it creates a little bit of vulnerability, and there's like a little bit of innocence to it, and they're in this like life and death thing, and they've got the guns, so it's kind of like macho, and the use of color, like just sitting here looking at it, the folds on the clothing, the way you did your fabric and the shading, it's great. It's definitely a strong second, or it might even be surpassing the sewer one for me at this point.
Okay.
But yeah, it's cool. And that's, having said that, this is also one of the covers that I thought might have been a Scott Hampton cover originally. I actually, as much as I hate to admit it, I haven't finished reading the series. I have every issue, but I got derailed somewhere along the line. And the last like year and a half, I still have yet to read. So I haven't spent as much time with these. And I think that's why when I originally saw it and I was like, yeah, the coloring and whatever looks kind of Scott Hampton-y. Sort of the line of like Fred's hair and the way you use your grays. Yeah.
But I like how they were incorporating, the colors of their costume with the updated versions of, what they had to wear in this situation.
It's so amazing. I've come to really think of these characters as just such a perfect example of good character design and art direction, like how iconic the colors are, their silhouettes. Like there's so many things about them that are just so perfectly delineated. Like I hadn't seen it myself, but somebody was telling me a little while ago about, it was an extremely minimalist illustration and it was using primarily color, and people were identifying it correctly as members of the Scooby Gang because they recognized the colors. And it was a very abstract image. And just the fact that they have that kind of identifiability, super cool. We already talked about what we think why Scooby is as long lasting as it is. Sure.
You've obviously done a lot more research into the original show. Why did they choose the type of dog that they did for Scooby? Do you know? Why was it he's supposed to be a Great Dane, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember now. It's been a while since I've given it any thought, but they wanted a dog. I think initially it was a smaller dog. I think Iwo Takamoto might have decided to go with a big dog for the comedy. And Great Dane got chosen. And there was somebody in the studio who...
Maybe someone had one or something?
In some way, they were involved with like breeding show dogs. And he wanted an example of like a Great Dane. And they gave him an example of a Great Dane. And he was like, okay, well, our Great Dane has to be a bad example of a Great Dane. So he bowed the legs. He kind of like went to the things that are supposed to be perfect in a Great Dane show dog and made them a little askew. And I think, I don't think there was a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, some of those things, I can understand. I guess because he's like so doofusy looking, but I guess that's the point because it's a comedy show.
And like it's supposed to be
because it was
like a noble, strong looking animal, and they make him...
I guess I was thinking, there can be other big dogs, but you think about, it is kind of a mystery show, so you would wonder, why wasn't it, like a German Shepherd or something that would be more of an adventure dog, if that's a term.
See, now
I guess
I'm going to go and hunt that down when we get off.
I'm sure it was just because of what he could look like exaggerated, and he could look kind of goofy, and they could give him more human facial expressions. But, I think about things like this after having done so much work on Beast of Burden.
Right.
And knowing why Evan chose certain dogs, and when I was, I guess, training myself, right, to figure out how I was going to keep drawing dogs realistically, but also cartoony. And I watched Lady and the Tramp a bunch and cried every single time. I can't even talk about that stupid movie. Sorry, it's not stupid, but that stupid movie about the end of it. Because I know the end of it were, spoilers, were Tramp's in the dog catcher's wagon, and old Trusty goes to stop him, and he sorry.
Take all the time you need.
Because I know he's okay, but he's a cartoon, and he's like 75 years old or whatever. But I watched it, and just to get, I care about all of these cartoons, and they were so real in the way that they moved and the way their world was and everything. And I think about them as that's an exaggerated, he was an old dog, a hunting dog. And I know that every one of those dogs was chosen for a reason, for their personality, right?
Right.
That Lady was this Cocker Spaniel because they could equate it with this kind of cute feminine beauty, and she could be young and innocent. And then Tramp was the mutt, but he was still, even though he was medium-sized dog, he was scrappy, and he could look like he could take care of himself, and the way that they drew it looked like he could take care of himself. and then Trusty being like old hound dog or whatever, especially being older, that just gave him the appearance of being more aged, having that flappy skin. And so when I think about like, why are you choosing Scooby-Doo dog as this like big kind of, like, because I look at a Great Dane and I don't think of funny at all with a Great Dane.
No.
I think of, when I was littler, I would have been afraid of that dog because they're big like a horse when you're like 6, and they're slobbery too. Like if you see them in real life, or a mastiff, oh good lord, that dog is a slobbery dog.
I had a neighbor who...
They're big and scary, but you wonder like why didn't they think of like a more like a big dog but a neighborhood dog, like a German Shepherd, or what's the other type, like a retriever or something like that, where they could have. But I guess he needed to be even bigger because he's almost human sized.
Yeah, I had a neighbor who was vegetarian, and she had a Great Dane who she also had on a vegetarian diet, and that was the saddest dog I've ever seen in my life.
Oh,
I just wanted to give it a cheeseburger.
Must have pooped a lot.
Probably did.
I mean, dogs are omnivores, so they can survive on kind of both things. It's not like a cat that's like technically super carnivore-y.
It was a very thin dog,
but
and a large dog.
Yeah, I'm sure he needed a lot more protein.
Yeah.
Than he was getting from his vegetable protein sources.
Do you have a favorite character out of the gang?
I guess Velma.
Yeah.
As a little girl, I always wanted to look like Daphne, but be Velma.
Fair enough.
She did the majority of the solving as far as I was concerned. I'd have to go back and rewatch.
Oh, she did a lot of the work in the background while everybody else was kind of running around. She's putting it together in her head.
Yeah.
And she was usually the one at the end explaining.
She was the Sherlock of the show.
100%.
Everyone might have been doing something and figuring, finding clues and whatnot. But then, if I think about it at the end, then Freddie was always the one that was like, it's so-and-so doing this and that. He was always the explainer of how like who was doing what. At least I remember it that way.
I think
I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I watched ye olde classic Scooby-Doo. Where are you?
One of the questions is, what do you think makes for a successful cover? But I think we might have covered that already. We were talking about differences between variants back in the process.
I think what makes for a successful cover, I personally like something that's either really graphically iconic, that stands as an image that just stands for, like in this case, Scooby-Doo, like it encapsulates the essence of what a Scooby adventure might be, or one of the characters. Or I like a cover that has a little bit of a story in it. When I'm looking at, like, there are certain things that I think you need to have to make someone stop. Like if you go to a comic book shop, there's a jillion covers popping out at you.
Yeah.
And unless you know what you want to look at, you have to treat every cover like there's somebody who never saw this before. It's not like they always know that Scooby-Doo comic exists or Scooby Apocalypse exists. It's that they came in to get the other comics they like, and something catches your eye. And that has to make it so it has to stand out against all of the other things on the shelves. And what I find on the shelves, usually when I'm in a comic book store, is something that's over-rendered in one way or another. It's either illustrated in such a way that everything flattens out in the cover, and then it may also even have like a logo that's hard to read. So then everything kind of just flat, like smushes out into this mush of a pattern that I can't really tell what's going on. So to me, that means you either have to simplify your covers and keep them with a limited palette, or use white or black in a way that no one else is using it. So it has to stand out. Even if it may not be that you know what's going on right away, but as your eye is scanning through all of these, like meticulously illustrated covers with a lot of like cross-hatching or lines for no reason, or having a lot of color on top of that type of illustration, like someone is working every angle of their Procreate and or Photoshop, where it's like, I'm going to make all this armor shiny, and I'm going to make this cape look like silk, and you can see every leaf and blade of grass and everything on the walls in the background and all this kind of stuff, where it becomes so busy that there's no foreground or background. And then you would really have to just know what you're go to that comic because you know what it is to see what it is. So if your eye's scanning across all of that stuff, if there's this boom, breath of something in the middle of it, it's like you're using some of the rules of design to make that eye-catching. And it's not like it has to tell you everything that's happening, but it has to get people stopping to look at it long enough to then come over and pick it up and say, what is this comic? I'm trying to think of things that have done that to me, not recently, but I really liked the Hawkeye comic that Marvel put out, because it was in two colors. It was in purple or violet, and then like a yellow ochre.
Those were great, really strong.
They're super strong covers, because I remember I was scanning, because the comic shop that I was going to, Challengers, they'd changed some stuff around, they'd moved section. So I walked in, and because there's so much to look at, I just looked, and I remember just my eyes stopping on that. And I went over, I was like, what's this? And it wasn't that I knew that that's what the Hawkeye comic was, but it made me stop and go over there and pick it up. So then I knew it was Hawkeye.
Did David do those covers?
I don't know, probably, because the inside was also very graphic too.
Yes. Yeah.
So it really, it helped one differentiate it from everything else that was there, and it drew me in to take a look. So it's that's what every cover has to do. It just has to make a person stop and say, "Ooh, I want to see what this is about."
Yeah,
and then they can figure out and go, maybe I don't like it. But in a world of mores, you have to be less. And in a world of less, you have to be more. It's like if every cover looked like that, and then you saw Art Adams, like Godzilla and King Kong in a jungle fighting with some bikini gal there. But if you look at Art's work, he uses detail to his advantage, and then his focal point, usually it's either one or the other. It's like there's always a focal point in what Art does. It's not, you don't get lost in it. So if that was cover, and it was in a world of super graphic, maybe oh God, what was that? Duran Duran covers. Who did that?
Nagel.
Nagel, Patrick Nagel. Patrick Nagel's all over there. And then suddenly you saw Art Adams. So you go, what's that? I want to take a look at that just to say why is this different? And so, I guess it's kind of good that nobody draws like me, because maybe that's one of the things that made you stop and take a look at the covers, is because it doesn't look like anybody else's. And either you look at it and go, oh, that's gross, or, oh, it's interesting, I love it.
The final question, speaking of seeing your stuff, for anybody who digs your covers and enjoyed this conversation and is curious about diving deeper into your catalog or finding new material you've got coming out, what would you recommend, or what do you want to promote?
Well, I like to promote the things that you've already mentioned. My Scary Godmother work, of course, because it's my own creation, Beast of Burden, that Evan Dorkin has written and I've illustrated most of, and Wonder Woman, the True Amazon, I'm very proud of.
I just bought a copy of that before I even knew that we were going to be talking. It was 2 weeks ago. I saw it and I was just I'm taking that home today.
Well, you'll have to let me know what you think of it. Right before we started talking, a guy on Facebook messaged me and said that he had just finished it and he liked it a lot. So that was really nice to hear. And let's see, actually, if you can find it, Finals with Will Pfeiffer that you mentioned is something I'm super duper proud of. At the time, it was black comedy, very satirical, dark comedy, but a lot of the stuff that we wrote about has long since come true and or been surpassed by the way the world has gone. And I keep telling Will that we have to write, but we have a sequel to it. We have so many more ideas for the characters or that world that we created in there, especially being able to look at it through the lens of what's happened in the past 20 years in the world. We really have some other interesting things that we would like to say, but because I've looked at it and I've read it again every once in a while. I'll pick it up and read it and say, oh my God, like everything that we were making a statement about some pretty horrible things in the world. And we had most people kind of just laugh them off because they were just so used to it. We were making a statement about like our contemporary society and how far it might go. And it was supposed to be things that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this. And so I was like, we must have some kind of horrible magic power. So we have to create a utopian sequel where things have switched around so we can change the world to a better place. Because, it's like the fact that a lot of the things that we wrote and joked about were supposed to meant to be shocking and sarcastic. And they kind of were just like, oh yeah, that happened in, 2004. And we've just kept going.
I can't remember which one of you turned me on
But
to
I
it.
am proud of that. I really like that one. And
You may not remember, but we have actually interviewed a few times previously over the last. First time I ever spoke to you was in 2000 or 2001 at San Diego. And I've spoken to Will once or twice. And it was either when I was interviewing him about Dial H for Hero, or it might have been one of the conversations you and I have had. But one of you mentioned finals and said that you wished more people had kind of picked that up just because you're proud of it. And that turned me onto it. And it was a weird thing for Vertigo to publish. And it's just kind of a diamond in the rough. And it's not something that a lot of people talk about in either of your catalogs. So it's like Moonshadow. Like not enough people talk about Moonshadow. So I would just bring it up. Every time somebody would talk about 80s comics, I'd be like, Moonshadow.
Some things fall through the cracks. I mean, like, I know when it came out, it's not like nobody noticed it. I just think, Vertigo was putting out so many things at that point. We were one of the things that came out. It wasn't a series. It was, a mini series. I like miniseries. I like things that are kind of complete in themselves. And, like Will is so talented. He's such a great writer. And he has a complete knack for writing an ensemble cast of characters. And he can take incredible direction, maybe almost to a fault. It's like he's so used to being able to change because his background is, since you've interviewed him, his background is journalism. So, and if editorial would come and say, oh, nix that story, we have to do a story on this now, he would like, oh, okay, he can do that. And I think, with other things that he wrote, I know he brings up all the time that he gets all this flack for that, like when Amazon's attacked or whatever, and that it didn't live up to what was expected. But I think every time he was given editorial direction about how something had to change, he changed it because that's what you do, instead of maybe standing his ground and fighting for something that maybe they wouldn't have wanted, that would have been, something more that he wanted. I don't know. I think he's just crazy talented and really funny and incredible. And I would love to collaborate with him again on something, finals or otherwise.
Well, if there's another one coming out, you have my money. So at least you have one person.
Good.
Anything new coming out?
Well, I have a bunch of stuff that I'm working on.
Anything that you can talk about or? Not
really.
Okay.
Can't talk about things the way you used to back in the day.
Yeah.
But I've got a couple of things with Dark Horse, and then I just got an email today for something that I'm going to work on.
Cool.
And then I've had my own projects on the desk. I'm working on more Scary Godmother stories. And then I have a story that I got to figure out a time. It's like I need more hands so I can draw more things all at the same time. But then I have a mystery that I really want to do that has cryptids and podcasts and all sorts of other stuff in it, and dark humor, but also super serious stuff in it.
All right.
And I think people will not expect it of me based on, the other stuff, not the other stuff that I've done, because I have done things that are adult in nature. Right. But just the fact that I've never written anything like this before for myself. So I would like to do that, but it's like, I really have to figure out how to work on 10 things at the same time, because what I do takes a while. And I've got I have certain things lined up right now. So I've got stuff that's going to keep me busy.
I remembered when I was writing the introduction, and also when I was buying the Amazon, I remember thinking back to when you first started on Wonder Woman And I remember you leaving Wonder Woman and going to work on Vertigo.
Sandman.
Yeah. Was Sandman Vertigo by then? It was, right?
No, I actually drew the first issue of a Vertigo book, which was one of the Sandman issues I did in Brief Lives. It was at the end of my run on Brief Lives. That's when Vertigo happened. There was when I started Sandman, Vertigo didn't exist yet. But yeah, I went from working on Wonder Woman straight to Sandman.
I remember the feeling that I had at the time was that you were doing the superhero book because, that's how you got into comics. And then like first chance you like ran off for the more higher prestige book or whatever. But you keep coming back to Wonder Woman. Like you've done things over the years, and it's not.
Well, I mean, I was lucky enough to be able to come back to Wonder Woman and write and illustrate a story that I wanted to tell. I've contributed here and there to things because I like the character, and as a freelance artist, when someone offers you work, you take it all the time. But when I was working on Wonder Woman, I mean, when I was a kid, all I'd ever wanted to do was draw superhero comics. So the fact that I got to was great. I always expected I would get to draw X-Men, and I have drawn some X-Men, not on a regular basis, but like little bits and pinups and things here and there.
I've got your X-Men Unlimited.
Good, because it's also characters that my favorite characters there too. So I got to do that. But then while I was working on Wonder Woman, Neil Gaiman saw my work and was interested in working with me on Sandman. So Sandman was, one of my favorite comics at the time. And to know that person wanted to collaborate with me. And my editor at the time was Dan Thorsland, and he really said, I like working with you on this and you do a good job, but I really think you're better suited to working on a book like that. It would really play to your strengths. And I thought that was pretty insightful for an editor to say, because they would be losing the artists that they had on their monthly title. But he was right. I mean, I feel like my strengths, like I like to make characters act, and I like subtle moments, and I like quiet moments. It doesn't mean I don't like to do action. I certainly do, but I like to do like really quiet storytelling with, like silent stuff that might just be like an eye movement, or like, I guess now it would be that monkey meme, that monkey meme, not to be all funny, but the monkey meme where it's like kind of looking down and it looks back and it looks away. With the side eye, that monkey puppet thing. But I like to do moments like that, if it's quiet. How in comic book form can I convey a really emotional moment with body language when you don't have the movement that you would in film? And I think I do that pretty well. And it was interesting at the time that was apparent even in my superhero work, that Dan said, I think you should be working on this type of stuff. And it would be good that you worked on this book. And he's been asking if you're available. So we think we should like somehow figure out how to sidle you over onto that, make a lateral move. Even though you're under contract on this book, we got to figure a way to get your contract, finish your contract out and get you over on that. And another editor would have just said to his face, no, she can't do it. She's working on this.
Yeah.
So I think it was very fortuitous that he happened to be my editor at the same time, or else maybe a different editor would have never mentioned that or tried to put the two of us together.
Yeah. All right. Well, I've taken up so much of your time today, Jill, for something that was originally not a lot of questions. So let's wrap it up. And thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you so much for talking about your covers. They're some of my favorites of the 36 issue run. And perchance we'll get an opportunity to talk to you again sometime.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me to your first ever audio part of your podcast. I'm glad I could fill up a lot of your time. I do like to talk about process and art and comics and most everything. I like to talk. I like to chat. I hope you learned something that you wanted to know, and I'll see you next time.
And there you have it. That concludes my conversation with DC Hanna-Barbera cover artist for Scooby Apocalypse, Jill Thompson. To be fair, Jill's done covers for more than just Scooby Apocalypse as far as the DC Hanna-Barbera line is concerned, but as far as the podcast is concerned, or the conversation, just going to list the Scooby-Doo stuff for now. If you enjoyed the conversation and want to check out more of Jill's work, you can find her on social media. Check her out on Twitter and on Instagram, both at the Jill Thompson. This is a good time to go and support artists. Pandemic has not been kind to people in the arts. Yeah, go show your support, go show your love, and check out her social media. If you want to check out my social media, if you're interested in keeping up with the goings-on of the podcast, I am on most things. There's the Facebook page, there's the blog that I mentioned. Once again, I'm going to stress scoobydoocast.wordpress.com. I don't update super regularly, but the most interesting stuff that does go on that blog is bonus features for some of the interviews where artists will contribute process work, artwork, sketches, cover designs, storyboards, anything like that. I'll usually post them as special posts on the blog, as well as the Apocalypse variations, which, as I said, will continue on the blog as text-based interviews, and that's the place where you will find those. Usually I'll give you a heads up that something is going up on the blog or on the podcast feed, usually through Twitter or Facebook, or Instagram, and you can basically find me on all of those at a podcast named Scooby-Doo. Twitter actually is at Scooby-Doo-cast, but Instagram and Facebook are a podcast named Scooby-Doo. Like, share, follow, subscribe, do all the things that help get the show into the eyes and ears of animation fans and Scooby-Doo fans, people who might find this content valuable or interesting. I guess there's also the YouTube channel, but the YouTube channel is just like the podcast feed. So I don't know, maybe YouTube is your thing. Maybe you prefer YouTube over Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever podcatcher you happen to be using. So I'll mention it. I will not leave it out. It will not be the redheaded stepchild of the podcast named Scooby-Doo family. And if you're a redheaded stepchild, I apologize if that was offensive. As far as episodes go, I am shooting in 2022 for a monthly schedule. I am hoping that I will be able to maintain the monthly schedule. It's been really irregular kind of up to this point, and I don't usually like addressing scheduling in actual podcast episodes because somebody might be listening to this in like 2035 and being like, what are they talking about? There's like 600 episodes to choose from, and this makes no sense. But if you're a follower in the present, you've maybe felt the absence, and I'm trying to get back to at least a monthly schedule. So next episode will probably be an extra episode. I do have a commentary for the first episode of A Pup Named Scooby-Doo, A Bicycle Built for Boo. So I'll probably be posting that in February, and we'll see what happens in March. So I'm promising here, I've said it, next month you will have a new episode. It'll be a commentary, hopefully for the rest of 2022, monthly episodes of the show that you have been kind enough to support and follow, and you're all awesome. I don't have much more to add, so I will leave it there. Thank you all again for supporting the show, for downloading the show, sharing the show. I don't know, maybe you did. Maybe you're letting friends and family, people you know that this is something that you dig and sharing it on your social media. That'd be cool. I would support that. I'm going to peace out of here. So take care. I hope everybody is staying safe and staying healthy. And we will see you all next time on a podcast named Scooby-Doo.
Everybody cheer! This is how we solve the mystery. This is how we solve the mystery.
So in summation, this narration is my donation to the art of mystery solving dictation. And here's what the bad guys say when they play where the law forbids.
Would've gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids.
This is how we solve the mystery. Bye.